Hello, everybody. Finally, we managed to get in contact with my wonderful friend and wonderful guest today, ELINOR BENNETT from Wales, who it was a little complicated today, but I'm so glad that we managed to make connection, that we can do the interview even 1 hour later. That doesn't matter. Life goes on. We have to. Absolutely perfect. I'm really so pleased that we can talk today and that we can meet and that we can spend hour or how long ever you want to. And it's really wonderful. I tried to put on the color which you like the best, and I hope that it fits the color which you really like. So I really hope that we will have really very nice day and a very nice hour. So ELINOR, welcome to be with us.
Thank you so much, Jana. It's a great pleasure to be with you. And I do apologize for the lack of, I don't know, my technical.
We are happy you are here. So that's fantastic.
Thank you.
Tell us anything about you. We would love so much to hear, of course, how you started the harp, how everything went through in Wales. Of course, the harp is very popular. So tell us everything, what it's your background.
Well, stop me if I'm going too long, you know. When I was a child, which is quite a long time ago, you know, back in the late 40s, there weren't many harpists then, you know. The harp was kind of interested. People were interested, but very few harps and very few teachers. So there was a teacher who came round to North Wales. She lived in North Wales, but then she toured for about 5 days by train and by bus. And she stopped in the little town where I lived, or near the town. I lived in a village called Llanwrlyn, which is the lake, Bala Lake. And I had lessons in the school in Bala after school. It wasn't part of the studies. And this lady's name was Alwena Roberts. And my father had actually bought me a harp when I was 5 years old. And he brought it from London. He bought it from a lady called Gwendolyn Mason and paid £30 for it, which is a lot of money. And for a Grecian Erard, a little beautiful Erard, and brought it back by train to the village in North Wales. And then Alwena Roberts, the teacher, then told me, your legs are too short, you can't reach the pedal, so you have to grow a little bit. So I was allowed to grow until I was 11 and started into what we call the secondary school, and had lessons after school in Bala. It wasn't altogether a happy time then, really, because there were so many other things to do. And at one stage, my teacher asked my mother, well, really, do you want ELINOR to still have lessons? She doesn't practice. And then my mother told me this, and I thought, well, I quite like this idea of playing the harp. You know, I want to continue. Okay, well, you've got to start doing something about it, my mother said, otherwise your teacher's not going to teach you. And so I said, well, I don't like practicing where everybody is, because we had one living room and the harp was there and my grandparents were living with us and they wanted to hear me practice. I wasn't too happy on anybody listening to me. So I asked, can I move the harp to another room? And they did, and provided heating and things there. And so I started practicing and I started getting quite interested in this thing called the harp. And before that, the harp had been in the corner of the room with a beautiful pink taffeta on it cover, beautiful cover. And I could hear all the strings about 5 years since I got the harp to the time I had started having lessons. And all the strings was breaking, pop, 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 they would go. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is so sad. And I begged and begged my father, please have me lessons. Anyway, I got big enough and I got the lessons. And I started practicing. And then there were, in Wales, there were competitions, and still are, of course, Eisteddfodau, they're called, and Eisteddfod is a competitive session. And in the national Eisteddfod, there's always a harp competition, and I was lucky enough to be entered to compete there. And who was the actual adjudicator in the national Eisteddfod for 5 years was Osian Ellis, the great Osian Ellis. And I was a child, and I had seen this wonderful harpist on television a lot when I was, you know, sort of 8 to 9 or 10 years old, singing and playing this harp. And I was mesmerized and loved it. You know, when I went to compete in the Eisteddfod, he was very kind and gave me prizes, first prizes and things like that. And that was my education on the harp in school, because I didn't study music in school. I had other ideas that I was going to be a lawyer. And I did a law degree. And so, but the harp has always been there. But the interesting thing in Wales was that, and still is, and even now more, because the harp is very popular here now. But there were always somebody who, even then when I was a child, would be in your village who was a harpist, and they would sing with a harp. And so there is a kind of popular culture about the harp. And
the tradition, right? It's really like a tradition.
Yes, of course. And it's, now I know that it's gone and known for a long, long time, but that there is a centuries-old tradition of the harp in Wales. I mean, it goes back to, well, the time of Hywel the Good, who wrote down the laws in the 10th century even, the harpists had privileged status then, and that kind of thing. So we know through the poetry of the Middle Ages that the harp was used as eulogies and as elegies, and it was a social instrument. And also there's a great deal of very powerful collection of music called the Appiu manuscript that comes from the later Middle Ages, or even sort of period of the early Renaissance, of harp music that is actually written down, and a very famous tablature called the Musica, written in 1613, but belonging to the Middle Ages. So, with up to that period, the harp has got this, we know about its documented history. And I feel very proud to be part of this little nation in the west part of Europe that has got such a long tradition of harp.
You are not a little part, you are a very important part. So
well, I like to think that, of course.
No, it's wonderful. And please, so you started to work and to study with Osian afterwards.
And I did, you see. But before that, I had decided that I wanted to be the silly idea of being a lawyer. And I did a law degree in the university in the town of Aberystwyth. But always craving for music, always knowing, well, I shouldn't really be here. I shouldn't be doing this. I want to do music. But I'd never done music in school. So after doing the law degree, I decided I was going to go near London to a place called Guildford to become a real lawyer and become a solicitor. And while I was there in the College of Law in Guildford, very prestigious place for lawyers, I then decided, right, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to pass these exams. I knew I wasn't going to pass because I just couldn't do the work. It was so uninteresting. And so I decided to go to a concert in London and caught a bus to go to the Victoria and Albert Museum, which is a wonderful museum. And at the time they had concerts. And this was a Sunday night concert by an ensemble called the Melos Ensemble. And I went to listen, and of course the harpist of the Melos Ensemble was no less than Osian Ellis. And I listened to a fabulous concert, chamber music. They were doing the Schubert Octet, the Trout one, and they were doing Debussy Trio and the Ravel Septet. Oh my goodness, I was in heaven. I can go back in my memory totally to the seat. I can see the people who were sitting by me. This was such a changing experience really for me. So, and I wrote a letter to Osian Ellis then and saying, well, I enjoyed this concert so much. And in any case, just a few months before that, in one of the Eisteddfod, which he was adjudicating me, had mentioned, well, if you get tired of law and if you really want to change, and if I can help you, please get in touch. So I had that big back of my mind. So I wrote him a letter and asked, please, can I come and play to you? And can we discuss if there's any chance that I can become a musician? Which was always what I wanted to do. I was always singing as well, and singing has always been a very important part of my life, always. Mm-hmm. And really, I think I would have loved to be a singer, because who would do something with one's fingers if you can have such a voice that comes from the whole of your body, as it were. But I mean, that wasn't to do. My father wasn't really keen on the idea, because there are so many good singers around. You're not such a good one, you would say, but then the harp you should play, And I said, yeah, I think you got to the point there, because there aren't many harpists at the time. So that's what I did, Jana.
That's fantastic. And please tell us, because there are maybe people who are not from the harp world, but they of course know Benjamin Britten as a composer. So can you tell us the story about how Osian has actually find out the connection with Benjamin, how he found out to actually that Benjamin Britten was writing pieces for him, that he has impressed him so much that we have, thanks to him, we have the pieces for the harp by Benjamin Britten.
Well, I'll try as much as I can know of the story behind it all, because this is a very important work that you refer to, of course, the suite for harp as the main solo piece. But the background is that Osian played and worked with Benjamin Britten for many years before that piece was written. He went back to the period, I think, in the late 50s or early 60s, when the story that I like very much of their beginning to work together was when he was doing the Midsummer Night's Dream in Aldborough. The Midsummer Night's Dream is a wonderful opera that Britten wrote in the early 60s. I can't remember the exact date. He had been asked to do harp parts, there are 2 harp parts in it. And another person had been invited to do harp 2. But unfortunately, the other person became ill and wasn't able to come up at the very last moment. So it's a big harp part. And so what they had to do was to combine harp 1 and harp 2 into one harp part. And so one act 1, I think Osian himself combined and wrote them together. The second opera, whichever one Benjamin Britten himself wrote, and then the other one, oh my goodness, I've got a blank on the lady's name. Oh, I'll remember in a minute. And she had to actually write the third part. And so he had to learn the whole part very quickly. But what was interesting was a few years later, from my point of view, I was placed in exactly the same place of having to learn the whole 2 harp parts together. But at least I didn't have to write it out. They had to write it out as well as learn it. So, but that's when he started working. Then he did a lot of work with Benjamin Britten on the operas, the church operas in particular, their fables, the very wonderful works, Burning Fiery Furnace, and well, many of them. And that was a fantastic experience to be in the opera, just in the audience there. So I think what that led when Osian was going to the Aldborough Festival, and he was invited to do a concert. And only very few Benjamin Britten would invite some of his preferred musicians to present a concert of their own choice. And he'd asked Osian to do this one. I think it must have been around about 1969 or 70, something like that. And he said, yes, of course, but I would like to... and I think Britten told him then, well, you can ask for a new piece of music to be composed for this concert. And the choice is totally yours. You can choose whichever composer you want to ask, And so, of course, I mean, the obvious composer to write was Benjamin Britten himself. And Osian will tell that he received this harp part through the post. And it's a wonderful work. And of course, he gave the first performance and recorded straight away. And I mean, it is an enormous addition to the harp repertoire, isn't it? That is such a basic.
Absolutely. And it would interest me. So it was like required that they offered to play a new piece, and that Osian could have asked any of the composer, right? So
that was the impression that he again. But I mean, with such a wonderful composer actually directing the festival, it was pretty obvious who was going to be asked, I would think. But this is the story that Osian tells. I
just thought maybe Benjamin did come himself to say, I would like to write a piece for solo harp for you, or this kind of how it came out.
Yes, of course, that would be there, wouldn't it? In the background, definitely. Yeah. And so, I mean, I then personally, I was lucky enough to go and play second harp in many of the operas with Benjamin Britten himself conducting and Osian playing first. Billy Bird, I remember very well recording, in Aldborough, and I also was asked to do the harp part in a tour of some of the chamber operas like Turn of the Screw and The Rape of Lucretia. And that was, for me, an enormous experience, because it was when I was still a student at the Royal Academy of Music. You know, this was actually paying my rent and for supper, really, for all that year, because I had no other income, because I had been very lucky in that I was able to go to the Royal Academy of Music. And again, thank you, Osian, for making it possible for me. And I worked very hard when I was there, I have to say, because I had a lot of things to catch up on, not only on technical stuff, but learning a lot about music, because I hadn't done any music in school. There was a lot of harmony and things to catch up on. But I was very lucky to have the second chance of actually going to the Academy after doing a first degree in Aberystwyth University.
So you were able to play operas together with Osian?
Yes, I did. And I did a lot of second harp in the London Symphony Orchestra and in the English Chamber Orchestra, and, you know, some solo by myself also.
And I know that because at the Congress where he performed, and we have the recording, which I posted already during this time when we were not sure if we will get in contact together. So the people could have already, maybe some of them listen to it and watch it.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful.
Yeah, it's already there. So he was performing together, as you said also, that it's usual tradition that you sing together with the harp playing, which is absolutely, for me, impossible. I cannot sing and play at the same moment, but it's a really big admiration for the people who can do that. But he's also there in a cooperation with his son, singer.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and I have heard some very tragic story, right?
Yeah, well, yes, of course. I'll say it as sensitively as I can, really, because Osian had set up a duo with and working with Peter Pears after Benjamin Britten had the stroke. And they had wonderful concerts. I went to several of them, you know, and Britten wrote the Canticles and it's a Happy Birthday Canticle and 2 or 3 works for the duo. And then when Pears died, Osian started to work with his son, Thomas Ellis, and he had a wonderful, wonderful tenor voice. And a lovely singer, and I knew him, Thomas and Richard, well, because I used to live in their home, looking after them as an au pair when I was in the Academy of Music in London. So Thomas worked for, I think, quite a few years. They did some tours and in the States and worked all over Britain giving these concerts. But sadly, about 10, 12 years ago, Thomas died, unfortunately, which was a great tragedy, and wonderful young man. And his brother Richard now, Osian, lives with in Pwllheli, which is in North Wales. Yeah.
Right. This is really very unique recording then that we have them together on the concert, and they are even singing together. So that was for me unbelievable that they are singing 2 voices. Osian is playing, and it's really very, very touching.
Yeah, well, you see, in Wales, we have a form of singing that is pretty unique. It is unique, really. We call it cerdant or penillion. And then you have to do 2 jobs when you're doing that. It's not even just doing a straight accompaniment, because your hands, your fingers will play one melody, and then your counter melody will come with a voice singing words. That, you know, it's a wonderful form of singing. I love to do it myself, and I've been doing it all my life, really. But yes, it's like playing any piece, really, any musical instrument, but you kind of divide your brain, you know, your body, one part of it goes on the singing, another part goes automatically, because what you do on the harp has really become quite.
But as you said, it is quite of tradition in Wales, so that you are actually educated from like childhood already, or
well, not everybody. I mean, it is. When I was a child, I lived in a very Welsh-speaking area, a very Welsh-speaking village, and there happened to be a tradition of singing, penillion singing in the village, and there was a lady who was a harpist who happened to live in the village, and there was somebody who trained us. So I did it since I was about 5 or 6 years old. I mean, that's my life, really, but in other parts, now Penillion singing is much more popular because it's being taught in schools, and you know, you can have a soloist singing with harp accompaniment. Not everybody does the singing and the accompaniment in the same person. I mean, it's usually a harpist and somebody else singing with. And then you have duos, you have duets and trios, and it's a very, very well-known form of singing, apart from the normal kind of singing of folk songs, which is another kind of form.
And have you personally established any ensemble for like trio or anything where you?
Oh, yes, I had a flute and harp duo for many years with a wonderful flute player called Judith Hall. We did a series of many concerts and a recording on Nimbus label. But she lives down in Devon, and I live in North Wales, so it's not so easy. When she lived in London, I spent a lot of time in London. That's when we did. I did in Wales. Now in Wales, it's rather different because I have a duo with a cellist, wonderful cellist called Nicola Pierce, who also teaches at the William Matthias Music Centre, where which I was partly responsible for forming a few years ago. And the music centre is in Caernarfon. So I work within the community more, and I hope I enjoy my work here very, very much indeed. And I think it's very important these days that we have an institution like the Music Centre, which is unique in Wales, by the way. It's not a very, not many others in this country. And so to keep music going and educate young people, and also give the opportunities for other people in the community to make music, and give work to musicians as teachers, and hopefully more as performers. And you know, in this time when the COVID-19 is raging around the place, we have to be very careful. But music is still very important, and the teachers we have in the music centre work online and teach online, and we're lucky to have this medium now, I think.
That's absolutely true. Yeah, and also very active in the organizations of the harp events. And so, tell us a little bit about this, because you're not a little bit. You can speak a lot about it because you have done that. You were in the committee of the Congress as well, and many other organization of harp. So, tell us all about this.
Well, I love having friends, international friends who are harpists, and being able to discuss and move around with such distinguished people. It's wonderful. It goes back, my involvement in organizing things goes back to 1978 or something like that, where I started what we call the Harps of Bangor, which Bangor is the university town near here. And my father helped me organize the first course, which was pretty new in this area. Anne Griffiths, my great friend Anne Griffiths, whom you must know, had been organizing courses down in, she did some in Bangor, but mainly down in South Wales for quite a few years before, and had the distinguished harpist from Netherlands, Dutch, Edward Witzenberg, come and give classes there. So I got to know Edward then, and this is a wonderful man, so I decided I would love to invite him over to North Wales also, and to do some courses with us here in Bangor, which we did in 1978. And my father was the secretary and treasurer and organizer and everything, and I was on there just doing a little bit of teaching and telling where he should send the invitations. And so that continued for about quite a long time. And my dad, sadly, lost him in 1986. So I had to find another way. And the university took on the organization. And in the meantime, also my great friend Maynir Halin from Wales she, together with Gillian Green, had organized harp courses down in Cardiff in the early 80s. And so we got together in, 1987, I think, and had our first all Wales meeting in a wonderful place called Greganog in mid-Wales. And so that was the Harp College of Wales. We called it rather grandly the Harp College of Wales, and invited international harpists then as well. So that came to an end, and we carried on doing, Maynor and I, different things. And then the Music Centre in Caernarfon established in 1999 precisely. And so that became the normal kind of vehicle to organized harp events. So became a bit more ambitious after having one or two, I don't know, we probably had about 6, I think, annual Wales Harp Festivals, and then, all right, let's go international. So I had plans and hopes, but they were aspirations and ambitions without very much basis in kind of organizational or in financial terms. So I happened to talk to the wonderful Jacques Francois of Camac. And once he heard that I wanted to organize an international festival, he said, really? Would you like to have a harp as a prize? What? Do you mean this? I mean, can you imagine my excitement? And said, yes, and not only that, I'd like to come and exhibit some harps. And you can have 3 harps for a prize. My goodness me. So we had 2 harps in the first festival. So that was a godsend. I don't think I could have started it without that enormous help. And so, that was in 2006. And then every 4 years we hold the international festival. So we've had 4. And then we're supposed to start organizing the next one fairly soon, I think, which will be in 2023, an Wales International Harp Festival. Wow. And that would be my swan song. It's going to be my last one. I'm going to retire then.
Oh, yes. You will not. So you will certainly stay and remain. It's not possible to finish these things.
No, but there's reason in everything. No, that's what I'm saying now. But well, anyway, I've got a good team, and that's without having a team of people together with you. You can't do. What's this? The economic situation is going to be after COVID. Goodness knows, there's going to be a huge impact on us in every way. I think not only in terms of economy, but the way we think. I mean, there's going to be a huge adaptation, I think, to society.
Yeah, it will be a little bit difficult, honestly.
But from us, music is going to be so important, such a civilizing factor.
Absolutely, yeah. And as we are talking now, also all these interviews at this moment is through the first Worldwide Online Harp Congress, which I have created. Somehow like connected to the World Harp Congress. Tell us, have you been at some congress performing, or have you been just visiting? Or I know that you were part of the organization as well. So just tell us a little bit of any memories if you have on any congress.
Oh yes, I played in the Paris Congress, which is in south of Paris, wasn't it? And that's the time, that was, if I remember, 1989, when the Iron Curtain had just come down, and when those wonderful Russian harpists had just come over, and probably yourself as well, with the communist regime had come to an end. And that's the first time I heard Tatiana Tower, and all of them, Vera Dulova even, I think. Maybe she had been over before. But certainly that's when I first heard Tatiana. And I became very friendly with Tatiana after that. I think the Congress after that was Copenhagen, I think, or somewhere, I'm not sure. Or one of the European, there were European symposia, weren't there? Yes. And so...
after Paris was Copenhagen in 1996.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so I came there to play as well. And there was a symposium in Amsterdam and in Nuremberg, I remember. That's where I saw Tatiana and became very friendly with her then. And invited her to come to Wales, and she did come. She came to give a series of masterclasses and things in Wales. And we did some work together as well. And what an amazing talent, and what a wonderful lady, and what a terrible, terrible disaster and tragedy that she died so young.
Yeah. If you were so close to each other, it will be certainly a treasure to hear some really her life as well, because I cannot talk to her anymore, and of course I only met her also in Vienna and in Paris, and then of course I was having her as an idol, so I was not even afraid to talk to her because I was very young. But you can say something. She was certainly the student of Vera Dulova, and she was studying in Moscow probably. And then if you can just tell, she was only soloist, right?
Well, yes. I mean, I can remember her playing so many of these pieces, and I remember telling her, you know, everyone to listen to her all the time playing the Russian things, because we'd never heard any of these Russian composers before that, and you know, these amazing repertoire. You know, she got a bit, oh, I'm tired of playing all this Russian stuff. Tatiana can play anything, and she really could, and she loved to do some jazz stuff and things like that. And she was she was the greatest harpist, I think, of her time, together with her. The younger person as well. I can't remember her name now, which is the yeah, of course. And so Tatiana came over here, and of course she went to live in Spain first, and then went to Holland, and that's sadly where she died, of course. And she came here to Wales to teach, and I think went from here and didn't go anywhere after that. She was very ill when she was here, very ill, and I knew when I was taking her to the airport, this is the last time I'm going to see Tatiana. That was great, great sadness. And she died very soon afterwards. And she should have come over that summer to play in Cardiff, because there were 2 harp festivals, Wales Harp Festivals, organised and directed by Marisa Robles. And Tatiana was due to come and do some work together. We were going to do some duos together. But sadly, she failed to come. That was really sad. And we were going to do the De Maza Sonatina for 2 harps. And so De Maza himself played one of the harp parts, and I played the other one. It was quite an experience.
In Vienna, Tatiana played this De Maza Sonatina with Vera Dulova together.
Yes.
So that's also the recording we will.
Oh, good.
We'll do it tomorrow. We will have it tomorrow. But also, only I know it's very, very sad memory, but it would really interest me how old she was when she passed away.
48, I think.
That's incredibly too soon.
And of course, the reason for her illness was the Chernobyl disaster. It was that awful thing that happened in Chernobyl in 1984, you know, and she had this cancer of the thyroid.
That's terrible. So she did not have children, right? She.
Oh no, she did. Yes, she had a son, I think. Now I'm getting a little bit forgetful. I should have done a little bit of research. And her husband, I know her husband was a musician. He was a double bass player. So there's a long time ago since I've seen her now. It's very sad, but I remember her extremely well.
Really, thank you very much for this memory, because it's really very important to also mention these people, and as there is very few who remember her so close as you do, so that's really, thank you for this.
Well, I've shared what I can remember, and I can say much more, but there are other people as well, I'm sure, who will be able to tell you a lot more about her as well.
Yeah, but of course, all the interviews are always very spontaneous, and we are not preparing anything. Because I wish that it's really very, very normal, like very friendly interview. So I just would like to ask you now, in this period of time, you are teaching online, and you are still, because you are very, very famous teacher, so you are still teaching at school, and you are also teaching online at this moment, right?
Well, I teach associated with the music center, William Matthias Music Center, you know, and I do under the auspices of the music center. Yes, and so if anybody in the world would like to know a little bit more, if they'd like to have lessons, I'd love to hear from them. This is a spontaneous thing. I hadn't intended to do that either, but I have 2 students now who are at this time actually completing their degrees in Bangor University and doing a recital of harp music. And of course, they can't do a live recital. Nobody can go and listen. So they have to prepare a recital on video. So this has been an experience of teaching quite difficult pieces, really, on that standard online. And sometimes it's very good, sometimes it's not, depending how many people are on the internet. And if the reception is not very good, as it can be here sometimes quite poor, then it's a bit of a struggle, isn't it? If you really, especially if what I find most difficult is if the connection isn't very good, what suffers, first of all, is the speed. And so the speed of the music also suffers. So when you're hearing maybe something like a Handel concerto or something, which of course the tempo needs to be regular, then it varies a lot because of the internet connection, then that's not ideal. But I found that it's a really good substitute when you cannot actually be face-to-face, because there's nothing like being face-to-face and in person there, listening intently, being very much engaged with what your student is doing. And I like that very much. I like the presence of students. I like the interaction, as I've learned so much from my students over the years. And I've taught a long time by now.
You said you have wonderful experience, and this is a new experience with the technology, which we, thanks God, we have it now at this moment. Because
it is, and I think that there are many people who are very inventive and very clever. I mean, I don't think I'll ever be that, but I can use, if other people can help me, I can use it. And that is right, isn't it? I mean, we have to be creative in whatever medium we have to be creative. I mean, the harp, for example, has changed over the centuries, from being a small instrument to being this wonderful big instrument. But all the time there are other harps of the same time, they are harps because the strings that are being struck, they're all very different characters and very different histories, but they are part of our scenery, they're part of our culture, and I think they're to be treasured enormously. And I haven't spoken to you at all about the triple harp, which I do love and I do play, and I enjoy doing that cultural stuff very much, because it's bringing that 18th century or 17th and 18th century music alive. And it's not just the music, it's the mores of the time, the habits, and the composers and how they would live and how people would play, how blind harpists would travel around the country with a harp on their back and still be able to play. All these things I find fascinating, and I love going through the collections of the 18th century and bringing them to life. And also there are many triple harpists in Wales at the moment who are doing new work, mainly on the folk scene, but also on the classical, if you like, Baroque period and things like that all over the world. So it's great to see that instrument being developed again. Although it belonged to the Baroque, it's still having a new life.
And you exactly point the topic which I wanted to continue with, because I read, of course, your biography, and of course I meant there this information, and I just want to ask you, you play very original harp, triple harp, or is it now the recent harp which was built at this moment, or is it the historical one?
I have both. I have one that was made in 1984 by John Thomas, not the John Thomas that we all know because of his Welsh arrangements, not him. John Thomas, who lived in Pembrokeshire, who died in 1989, I believe. And he made this harp for me in 1984, and a copy of what we call the Llanover harp. And the Llanover court of Llanover was very important in Welsh history. There's a very imposing lady called Lady Llanover, Gwenynen Gwent, we'd call her in Welsh, the Bee of Gwent, that part of Wales in the south of Wales. The interesting, in more global terms, is her connection with the British state, because her husband was called Sir Benjamin Hall, and he was a member of Parliament in the 1830s in London. He was a Liberal, but he was Clerk of Works when the new Parliament building, the one with Big Ben, that was built. And the reason why Big Ben was called Big Ben was that Sir Benjamin Hall was rather big, and he was the person who was Clerk of Works, who was building Big Ben, the clock, and the tower, and the whole of the Houses of Parliament. So there's a very clear link between the triple harp and Big Ben. So that is just a little joke, really. Well, it's not. No, it's not. It's an interesting, very interesting connection, I think. So because you asked me if I had an original harp, yes, I do. I have a harp that was made in 1755, I believe, with 3 rows of strings, made by a person called John Richard, and he came from the town of Llanrwst in North Wales, and actually became a very famous harp maker because he made harps for Queen Anne's court. And this is, being on the royalty thing, the harp has always got a connection with royalty, has always had in Wales for many, many years, well, since the 17th century. John Richard was a great compatriot, and I don't know, saying friend would probably be too close, but would have known John Parry, the harpist, the triple harp player, and made John Parry's harp. And so this is a nice connection to have a harp that was made for, harp, but made another harp for John Parry's, not John Parry's harp, obviously, because that was destroyed somewhere in a fire. But, it's lovely to have this connection with the past. I enjoy history.
Amazing. It's really amazing. And because also interests me, and I'm sure that many harpists interest, how this triple harp works. Because I'm always impressed if there are the 2 rows, because 2 rows is already enough. And when there are 3 rows, how you get into the 3rd row, and if they are crossed or if they are in 1 row, or what kind of tonalities they are tuned in. If you can just explain us a little bit about this.
Well, tell me first, how many hours do I have to tell you?
As many.
I wouldn't dream. I'll do it in a nutshell, a very, very small nutshell. It's a historical fact that music developed in the 16th century, isn't it? We all know that. And we all know that there were harps with 1 rows of strings, and so they were inadequate to cope with the chromatization of music and the development of more interesting scales. So in Spain, they started putting an extra row, and I think in Italy, but in Italy eventually, and compressing history into a tiny fraction, they then realized that 2 rows wasn't quite enough because you wanted to have even more chromatic notes. So put the 3rd row in the middle, if you like. That's the easiest way of explaining it. So both outside rows would be tuned diatonically into the same key. Let's say for a moment we're in the key of C major, just for ease. So you have do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do on both sides. And so what you do in the middle between the 2 C's and the D's, right? You would have right in the middle there a C sharp. And then between the E and the F, you'll have an F flat, or D, where am I? Between the C and the D, you have a C sharp. Right? Then between the D and the E, I'm sorry, getting confused in my old age. And between the D and the E, you have got the D sharp, which can also double as an E flat, of course, as we know. And then so on and so on, So there's many treatises have been written, and scholarly works have been written about the actual tuning. But in actual fact, we musicians adapt, and adjust and make things work. So I think people would really do that in times gone by as well, and retune. And scordatura was a fact of life. When you started with maybe 1 key, and then suddenly you found you had to go to another, and suddenly you had to just retune those strings. So, I know some people would actually try and play every piece in the 1 key that they're tuning, but in reality, you retune as you need to. I'm always conscious when I'm planning a program that you have to vary a little bit on the keys. If you keep into the 1 key, then there's auto fatigue creeps in very easily, I think. So you have to either take 2 harps and not have to tune, or you have to take a little time and ask your audience to, can you talk for a second? And you know very quickly which ones you need to retune. And that's what people would have done in those periods. They would have retuned. Practically, I think now it's certainly in the more of the folk music that we tend to do in Wales. You would find that the keys that are used are G and D and C. Normally, they're round about those focuses. And so the technique of getting, what I find most hard is to play runs, on a scale in the key of C when you're tuned in C is easy. But if you wanted to play A when you're tuned in C, it's not so easy, is it? If you imagine going, I can't, it's difficult to do that. So, you know, you choose what you can do. And I've learned to play one of the Paris sonatas on the triple harp and loved it. But I have had to adjust a little bit because I have had to take the view that I am a 20th century harpist. Kind of stuck with, you know, all the preconceptions that I have of as a 20th century harpist, and then revert to somebody who happened to be 2.5 centuries earlier, and have to rethink the ideas, you know, and therefore I have to change slightly. I try not to change very much, but I do play number 3 sonata, and I enjoy it very much on the triple harp. It seems to me to come alive, you know, in a way that it didn't playing it on the concert harp.
But tell me, when you play the middle row of the strings, do they use nails?
No. Well, I think there's a combination of nails and top things. You know, we have in literature somewhere written that the harpists of this period of the 17th, 18th centuries, 18th probably to early 19th, would like to have a very hard sound, and they would harden their fingernails. But this is not a nice thing to do. Don't try it. They would put their fingers on they'll put a hot poker. You know what a hot poker in the fire, a stick that you put in the fire to poke it and, you know, to refresh the fire. They'd make that red hot and then put their fingers on it to singe the strings, their fingers. So the skin become hard. So it's a striking the strings, you know, there's that feeling that you strike the string rather than what we do in after the French technique and the influence. So there is a combination, I think, of fingertips and nails coming into it. And I find I don't play with the nails intentionally, but sometimes it's easier if they're a little bit longer and you can get into the middle thing. But I don't, because I have the preconceptions of a 20th century harpist, and they like to have an even sound and all of that. So I try to have an even quality. And I do find that there are ways. I do remember once having a session with the famous Welsh triple harpist who died also in the 70s, Nancy Richards, who was a great character and a wonderful lady. And she was the person, the last person who survived, who was actually taught by the traditional harpists of the early 19th century and the late 19th century. And she would show how easy it was. She was quite an old lady and lots of injuries on her fingers. But she said, this is easy, you can easily, but you always slide. And I remember that thing, you slide from the middle to the outside. And so there are techniques but what I found is that I've picked up what I can do from the collections of that period, the periods of the late 18th century, the music of John Parry and Edward Jones, so the King's harpist, and learned them. And, you know, when you do that, you teach yourself how to do it, really. You have to, if you want to. You have to persevere.
Indeed. And of course, the tension is much less than in the classical harps. It's very, very smooth.
Oh, certainly, much.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, you know, and also on my John Richard harp, the old harp made in 1755. I mean, it's just been repaired by a wonderful repairer, Tecwyn Jones in North Wales. I mean, he's been telling me now, don't tune it up to, you know, pitch. You don't do that. I mean, in Baroque period, they would never have it. It's difficult to play with other musicians, modern musicians, and that. I don't do that. I just keep it for my solo work, really, on the triple harp. And I use my John Thomas triple harp if I want to do something with ensemble and play up to pitch. Yeah.
And how big is the harp? Are they different sizes as well, or is it?
Yes, the John Richard one is quite small. It's quite small. It's a lady's harp. Not literally, but it is also, of course, that John Richard is to be played on the left shoulder, because this is what the old harpists in Wales used to do. They wouldn't play on the right-hand shoulder. No. This is a lovely story about John Thomas, the John Thomas of the collections of Welsh melodies, you know, the Queen Victoria and John Thomas. And he was a triple harp player originally. He learned when he was a child down in South Wales. And he won a scholarship to study in London. That was actually being paid for by the daughter of Lord Byron, the famous poet, Lady Lovelace. And he studied at the Royal Academy of Music when the Academy was very, very new institution. And he was a pupil of, oh dear me, can't remember the name. That's it again. This is too spontaneous, this talk. I have to go back to the research. But he was taught by a wonderful teacher. And the teacher said, well, I'm not going to teach you on the triple harp. You've got to leave the triple harp because you cannot do anything on the triple harp. I mean, this is ridiculous, he would have said to him. So you've got to study and move to the concert harp, which he had to do. And he was a young boy of 12 when he came up to London, and his parents and everybody moved back up to London. And he didn't speak any English then. He would have been a monoglot Welsh speaker, and he had to learn to speak Welsh, learn to be in London, have lessons in the Royal Academy of Music, and turn to play with the harp leaning on the right shoulder, not on the left anymore. And so he lived then as to become, you know, well, one of the greatest harpists of his period, certainly, I think, and left a lot of stuff for us. And you know, he was very, very much a person of his time, and cannot judge him otherwise. I mean, he's got to be judged according to the standards of his period, I think.
But it must have been really very difficult. I don't know if the harps at that moment, or maybe even the triple harp, is it equal, or is it also like made for a certain shoulder which you should use for playing? Because if you change it for this one, the normal classic harp, you cannot change it because it's already built for the right shoulder.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
So the triple harp is equal, or is it built a different way?
Well, again, the two harps, the old harp, let me finish with that. It's built for the left shoulder. So, you know, for me I still play it on my right shoulder. I cannot imagine the journey. I spent a whole week trying to do so once, you know, out of, well, respect really for the old tradition. But I decided, I mean, I could never play with the left hand as I could play, you know, it was not for me. So I decided, no, I'm going to do what I can. And now then, the John Thomas harp, triple harp, the one that I bought in 1984, or whatever, that was built for a person to play on the right shoulder. So it also has a very, it's very interesting technique of building it, really. What John Thomas found or invented, I guess you could say, was that the two outer rows were on each side of the pillar. You know, the pillar goes up there, and then the bridge, the whatever you call the top of the harp, the harmonic thing. So one row goes one side of the string neck, let's say, and then the other row goes on the other side of the string neck, and then the middle row goes right through the middle of the string neck, and he's got a metal reinforcement for the string neck, so it's very, very strong and very balanced and very equal. So, you know, this is a device that really has transformed tuning for the triple harp, because it is a problem. You know, tuning for the triple harp can be really, if you think a concert harp can be difficult, then you have not been born. You need to play the triple. And so this device really has helped a lot. But sadly, John Thomas died, and I'm not sure if these harps are being made anymore. I've been trying to persuade my friend Alan Shires to make more in Llandersil in South Wales, but he's not yet made them, but I hope they do someday.
I'm sure even if someone will hear this interview, it will spread, and the people can really suddenly realize that there is something missing on the market. And also it would interest me, how many octaves has the harp?
It's got more than 90 strings to start with. It's got 91 strings. So I mean, their octaves are about, it's 6 actually on my bigger one, on the John Thomas one. It's yes, and he went a little bit overboard, I think, over the top, because he also played some wire strings on that one, which is not really to be done, you know, but this is what John did. He was devising things and he was inventing, and he wanted to do things a bit differently, just to try it out. So that my harp has got the wire strings, which shouldn't really be there, but you know, it is about 6. Yes, I think so. 6, well, 5.5 on the John Parry, John Richard harp, the 18th century one. It's less. It's about 4.5, I think, on that.
But it's big, really. It's very
Oh
big.
yes, oh yes, yes, yes.
It's really, you can play many pieces on it already. It's not really very limited then.
What, the triple harp? No, I mean, it's got all the possibilities of chromaticism. It's got all that wonderful synonyms. You know, we've got the 2 outer rows singing together. And by the way, we say sing the harp, not play it. There's canyrdelin in Welsh, to sing it. And in the language of the soul on its strings, that's another little quote about the triple harp that I love. Iaith enai dareithanai, the language of the soul on its strings. So there's a lot of, you know, poems, poetry, and romanticism as well, I guess, but very beautiful, yeah. So the triple harp has got so much into the Welsh character as well now, and it's a wonderful thing that has been revived, as it were, and taken over the world. I mean, people like Robin Hugh Bowen and people like that are doing, and Llyr doing wonderful work. And it's great to see young people coming as well. And I hope they continue, and I hope that the new harps will be made, you know, as well.
So you are the teacher also for the triple harps?
Well, I do teach triple, of course. I'd love to teach more. I really would love to teach the triple harp, that the people can really continue, you know, because what's the point of my doing it if in a few years I'm not here anymore, you know, and I want this tradition to carry on very much.
Fantastic. Please go and immediately contact ELINOR for the...
Oh, not everybody at once, no.
It would really interest me so much to at least to try, because I have never even seen it. I only saw it live. So it would really interest me how it works, how it sounds, if it's more metal string, like metal sound, or if it's more like warm sound. You know, that's all these things you cannot until you touch it by yourself.
Oh, absolutely right. I think the main thing with the older 18th century harp that I have is that, to me, it sounds more like a lute. It's a light sound, and not at all. I always imagine more like a harpsichord, but it's not. It's a lute sound, really. And but what it has is got the depth, the bass, as well as the treble, and it's got that wonderful color, you know. But it's small sound. It's not a big sound. You can't force it. If I was to force it, I'd probably break the harp, and I wouldn't really want to do that.
Yeah. But
you know, it's the purity of the sound, and it is a chamber instrument, you know, and that's what it would have been in small places. So that's the quality. You have to respect the character and where they come from. And I think it's like a person who's standing in my studio there, and every harp that I have 2 Erards, and they kind of have their own stories, don't they? I have a single action harp, which also I love to play, because that was coexisting with the triple harp in Wales. And the old harpist called Edward Jones, he was the King's Bard at the end of the 18th century. And he actually wrote music, some arrangements of Welsh for dance tunes and things like that, which probably were the popular music in the theatres of the period. And he wrote about the new varnished harp that has just come in, you know, taking over from the old, more rural, more, unpolished harp of the triple harpers, who would take the harps on the horseback.
And as it is really very traditional Welsh harp, do you know any composer out of Welsh who composed for triple harp?
Of course.
Past.
Handel, Monteverdi, Trabacci, all of the Italian ones, you know, there's huge. I mean, Andrew Lawrence King has been the person who has made so much inroad into this, and so his research is just wonderful. And you have people in Italy, Mara Galassi, and there are lots of people. And from Germany, I heard a young man recently, and playing music that has never been played, you know, written by John Parry, and is in our National Museum, and brought great shame upon a person like me, because you have Maximilian Erhard coming to play in the National Library in Wales, and I enjoyed his playing very much. But he plays admirably. I mean, and he does also retune, But some people try not to really tune at all, and I think that is just being torturous to oneself. Yeah, but there's a lot still to be found out. There's still a lot to be learned and to connect up with years that have been, you know. But there's also in the 20th century so much music, you know, that's been, if I speak about Wales, there have been so many composers who are still alive and still doing work, you know, who have taken the repertoire on enormously since, I would say, since 1970. I mean, we had in the 50s and 60s, we had wonderful composers such as William Matthias, Alan Hodinott, Daniel Jones, and Grace Williams. Three of them wrote music for the harp. Not everybody did, but you know, there are now a lot not young composers, but people who are still alive, like John Metcalfe and Gareth Glynn, and oh gosh, Guitar Pure, and lots of them are still writing for the instrument. You know, the concert harp now. I mean, and Mara Demlin, one of my pupils, ex-pupils, who did a joint composition and harp recital PhD in Bangor University. She's written some wonderful music, and I hope she writes more because it's really innovative and new and fresh. And you know, so it's wonderful to see these young people, you know, composing and still playing and taking things on, isn't it?
Absolutely. But is there a particular piece in these days which is written for the triple harp?
That's a challenge. I think I shall have to go to somebody and ask, come on, do it.
Absolutely. It will be really something what will be so unique, and so something what will bring this instrument again alive in the music, like modern music.
Yes, on the composed classical kind of art music we're talking about now, I guess, aren't we? Because I mean, on the level of folk music, you know, which is more sort of improvised. I think there a lady called Llior has done a lot of very, very beautiful stuff, you know, really lovely, and recorded it on the triple harp, and some of it is original music and some of it are arrangements of older tunes that nobody knows anymore, you know, and she's gone to the trouble of finding them. And then, you know, she is very innovative in what she's done, and I admire a lot of it. I heard something without knowing what it was, and I thought, my goodness, is this a lute piece? What is this? And then it turned out that she had composed a piece, and this was just on a radio in Wales, and I really thought it's so beautiful. And so the triple harp is a medium. Yes, I think we'll have to give them a challenge again, because composers find the harp challenging, don't they? Don't we know it?
Absolutely. No, you have to be one who will really promote this to many of the composers, and we can now share it and really spread this wish, because it's really something
I must be careful what I say, because lots of people may listen and think, oh, you've got to do it. No.
I play always on the classical harp, you know, it's always possible. So, and because you are from Welsh originally, how do you say harp in Welsh language?
Telyn.
Telyn.
Telyn. T-E-L-Y-N. Telyn.
Yeah. Telyn.
We don't know where there's a lovely little anecdote or explanation maybe of the name. Telyn doesn't seem to ring any names. Well, it comes from the Italian, or it comes from Latin, or it comes from English, you know, whatever. It doesn't. So at one stage, I think in the Middle Ages, the Irish harpists were taking the mick out of the Welsh harpist, I guess, because the sound of the Welsh harp was a small sound, and it would have been made, the strings would have been made of horse hair, and the actual body of leather, just with a wooden frame, and then leather over it, and then the horse hair. So it would have sounded rather small. And the Irish harps were quite strong and had wire strings, so they would sound like bells, you know. So it is said that the Irish harpists were being rather scornful of the Welsh sound and call it like the buzzing of bees, and that's Telyn in Irish is the buzzing of bees. So Telyn would have been taken from the Irish language. I just do not believe that. But it gives you an idea of what the sound of medieval small Welsh harp would have been, you know, the ones that would have been used in the courts and things.
So it's really interesting, because your language is so different than any other, and it's really interesting to know that it goes totally out of every language to be similar to. And the triple
no, No, but they are smaller languages. The language of Cornwall, the Cairn language, which died, unfortunately, and the language of Brittany, very, very closely connected, very, very similar.
Okay.
You know, you listen to a lot of it. The words are the same, the construction is the same. You have what we call mutation. And the other part of the Celtic languages, the Irish language and the Scottish Gaelic and the Manx, they are very closely related, but not so closely related to Welsh and Cornish and Breton.
Exactly.
So there are other languages like it, and there are many, many other small minority languages throughout the world, and certainly in Europe, you know, which has been during the period that we were part of the European Union. We were so glad to have that connection with the smaller languages. Alas, I hope that will continue, that we have been so stupid as to leave the European Union, which is a crazy thing that has ever happened. And, you know, I hope that our connection with the culture of Europe will continue, and with, especially with the smaller minority languages and our old cultures, because we so much belong together.
We certainly do, and I'm
sorry, I was going into politics now, which is the other question.
But let's come back to the Congress. Yes. I want to, because it will also, I would like to know if we will have a chance to see triple harp on the Congress in Cardiff next year. Do you know?
Yes, I am going to be playing. Yes, I'm going to bring my John Richard harp, and thank you for asking me about this. Yes, and I'm going to give a little, I think about half an hour's talk about, I'm playing the instrument, because I think originally it should have been a talk, but I mean, what does a musician just talk? Why doesn't one just sing and play, you know? And so I'm going to play.
It must be demonstrated. It must be played. It must be really heard, and like the sound and everything. I'm impressed to look forward for this.
Oh, there'll be several. There's going to be an ensemble of triple harpists coming from California.
Wow, fantastic.
Yes, indeed. As the Dragons harps or something, I think they're called. Wonderful, all in California. And they're going to give us a presentation. So there'll be quite a few triple harpists there. So
fantastic.
We'll be enlightened, Jana.
So everybody is welcome, of course, and I'm sure that everybody is excited to hear, because not many of us really had a chance to see it and to hear it. So is there anything, any wish which you have in your mind, any dream which you would like that happens to you in your life still, and that you are dreaming about? Is there anything?
To see my grandchildren is what I want to see at the moment. It's been 2 months, 3 months even. It's really hard. That's my big wish. That will help.
They are living in Wales, or they're
living in the other part, in the other end of Wales, in Cardiff. Both of them. I have three granddaughters. Wonderful. Anna Gwen is 13, Peggy is 10, and then there's a little baby who is 3 months. And I've missed her babyhood almost, you know, since she was born. I've seen her twice, but I'm dying to see and hold this baby. And then my daughter has 3 boys. Twins who are 11, Jack and Kai are 11, and Morgan, who is 5 next week. And I won't be there for his birthday party. That's what I want more than anything, is to be with them.
I totally understand this, and I wish that at least you will be able to see them very soon. And
I hope so. Yeah. In terms of music, yes, I hope I can carry on, at least if I can't play. I mean, I have some arthritic problems, but not big. I can still play. But if I can't do that, I hope I can teach and pass on what I have learned and what I enjoy passing on to others. That's the main thing I would like to do, really.
Yeah. Fantastic. And are you also doing some transcription of the pieces, or are you doing something like that?
Well, I have the music that was written for me back in the 90s and early part of the century. I have actually produced and edited and published, so they are all available. I mean, you know, they're called harp music by the living harp is what they call, 2 volumes of them, by mainly Welsh composers, not only Welsh composers. But I had this music on my stand, on my shelves, and I thought, oh dear me, what am I going to do with all the stuff, you know? And then a new publishing company started up just up the road here, and they took them off and said, well, we'll publish them, we'll love to do that. So I was glad to get it. So Living Harp will have collections of music, 2 of them, and personally I don't think I'll do much more composing myself. That's not my medium, really. I'm not very good at it. But I might write down some of the arrangements that I do for Penillion or for the triple harp. That's possible. Going back to Osian, may I just show you Osian Ellis now?
I would love to.
It must come to the end of our session, must be. This is the music that he's just written. I don't know if you can see it. It's called Lacrimae, and this lacrimae, as you will know, means tears. And it's a very sad piece, but he wrote it in memory of his his son's daughter-in-law, who died last year. And it's a fabulous piece. And he has actually recorded it himself now recently. And this will be available fairly shortly. So I hope that everybody can look out for that, because it's very
absolutely. And I really wish that you can also share many, many greetings and hugs from all of us, that we wish him all the health in these days.
Well, I'll do my best. He made me have the opportunity of listening to this, and I hope that he won't think that I've said things that are not right or something. I don't know.
No, absolutely not. I'm sure that he will be very pleased to hear all what it has been said. I'm just looking through the interview on the program. He is going to he's performing at this congress, and I just want to. Oh, I cannot now find it, but I just wanted to know, because there is also one piece by Britten he played, and it was with the singer, but it's actually was something what was written for him. Yeah, here it is. A birthday Hansa poem.
Oh, yes. For the birthday of the Queen Mother, the Queen who died, you know, the Queen, the present Queen's mother. And he played a lot for her. And I think he was actually called the Queen's harpist or something at one stage. Even, you know, I think he played so much in the company. So the birthday Hansel is for tenor and harp. Yeah, one of the wonderful pieces that Britten wrote for Osian with Peter Pears. And which Thomas would have been then singing with Osian as well. And so Britten also wrote the folk songs, you know, British Isles of the British Isles for voice and harp. And they're great. They're great. They're not altogether easy, some of them, and you have to get used to them in many ways, because we're used to folk songs being in, you know, harmonies of tonic and, you know, 1, 4, 5, and that's it. But, you know, Britten's arrangements are not that. They're different, and they're great. The birthday Hansel and the canticles is the other thing, isn't it? Those were another creation of that period. That
It's really fantastic. And of course, we all know Ceremony of Carols. It has been also written for him.
Yeah, well, no. That was before Osian became a harpist. That was during the war, because Britten actually was traveling back from the States. And he, so far as I heard, because one of the people whom I had lessons with in London when Osian would go away on his tours was Gwendolyn Mason, who was Osian's teacher as well. And Gwendolyn Mason told me that she played the Ceremony of Carols in a church in London during the war, when there were no lights were allowed. You know, there's a blackout and no lights at all, because it's dangerous. Terrible times, of course, and she would have played it by candlelight in a crypt church. And I don't know exactly where, but there is a wonderful crypt church under the Houses of Parliament, where I've been actually going to sing with the Parliament choir, strangely enough. And I would have loved to have known that she would have done the Ceremony of Carols there, you know, back in 1942, I think it was. So she, and there were other harpists. There was a harpist called Enid Simon, who did a lot of work with Britten as well, before Osian, you know. But once Osian was on the scene, I think, you know, he pretty well did everything that was required there. He has such imagination in his sound, you know, and so much vitality, and a great projection, you know, characterful, which is great. So that's what Gwendolyn Mason was, a fantastic harpist as well, from Wales originally, and she worked with Ravel when Ravel, the first performance of the septet was given by her in London in the 1920s, and with Ravel himself actually conducting it.
Wow.
So she, you know, she was a great influence and great inspiration. So That's wonderful teachers, really.
Absolutely, because these are all the main compositions in the harp repertoire, and to know the history of the coming them alive, it's unbelievable.
Yeah. It's great. It's great that I had lessons from Gwendolyn Mason as well as Osian. They're all on the interpretation of music. There's very little talk about, articulation or that had to be done otherwise. I mean, the interpretation was, and the singing behind, the music and the way you felt the music. It was such important for her. And, yeah, really old lady, and I got very attached to her and very, very friendly. Missed her a lot, of course.
What treasure to have this opportunity to meet and be together with those people.
Indeed, you treasure it for life.
Yeah, absolutely. And tell me, did you also personally meet Benjamin Britten?
Oh yes, I worked with him several times.
And you worked also on the suite with him?
No, not on the suite, no. But with Osian I did. I had finished being a student when I was with Osian, when the suite was written. So I wanted to do a broadcast using the suite for the BBC. And I thought, oh my gosh, I have to ask Osian if I can have a lesson on this piece, And I thought I was playing it pretty well, actually. I thought I learned it, And then he came to my house and gave me a lesson, which I thought it was going to be an hour. 3 hours later, I went around the house. I was like, in my mind, picking up bits of myself, which was rubbish, from the floor, because I had not understood the piece at all. And putting all this rubbish that I had created, into a plastic bag in my mind, figuratively speaking, and putting it in the bin, because I had really not understood what the message at all was. It's just extraordinary. I mean, I'll never forget that experience. And he was such forceful, and absolutely authentic. You had to respect and you had to listen. A plastic bag somewhere in the dump.
You made me really laugh, because I know that many of the students, they are always having the same impression that they are totally lost.
Yes, exactly. So, and this was when I was already into my career, and I had already done a lot of work, and then to be really taken down and become, oh dear. But then, the challenge was there. Then I had to really take this on board and really work on it and really find where the meaning of the music was, But I did work with Britten quite a lot. I mean, we, and Peter Grimes, a recording of Peter Grimes in Aldborough. I was doing the second harp with Osian doing the first harp, of course. And also on one of the Midsummer Night's Dream, which I spoke to earlier in the interview, that was Benjamin Britten himself conducting that as well. Wow. So it was a great honor,
Well, he certainly loved the harp. He was having such
Well, he loved it with Osian, and he loved what Osian was doing with it. And that's, you will appreciate, is a very different approach. It's, I think, more like what we would play, or as I was talking about earlier, about the triple harp attack. The sound of being a little bit accentuated. Because if you notice in the suites, there's a lot of accentuating signs, and that's the approach that Osian, personally, his style of playing. And I think that is, and I think because of the friendship, that developed, that the influence was there all along, and very important. Thank goodness.
And is it recorded by Osian, this suite?
Well, he told me, I don't know if he did a one later, perhaps he did, but he went straight into the recording studio after giving the first performance in London, probably, I'm not sure, Queen Elizabeth Hall, I'm not sure. And then went straight to record it into the studio. That was probably the best thing to do. It's a complex piece, isn't it? And to have learned it quickly and recorded it was quite brave, I would think.
And certainly many people have different opinion on it. So it will be really very big treasure for all of us to hear the original performance of the person who worked with Benjamin Britten on it. So
yeah, absolutely.
Any of the recordings to be able to be found on the.
Yes, and I think the one thing I would like to say about this very much is that do take great care with what Benjamin Britten actually wrote, his directions. I've seen people reinterpret the fingering putting different fingering in. And no, that should not be done. I mean, you should really do what is written. It's not idiomatic sometimes to do that, but it produces a different impression, a different effect, a different. It feels maybe more difficult, and that's exactly what should be. I mean, music making can be hard, can be physical effort, and can be difficult, painful even. And that's some parts of the Britten suite will sound like that. It's not easy, jolly music that is flying and being on the surface. No, it's not that. It's really down. Go down as deep as you can into your own soul as well, not just into the sound of the music, but find out where especially in that hymn, the last of the work in them.
Yes,
which is great.
Oh, thank you so much for this really very, very impressive talk and very advices. It's unbelievable what you have given to all of us during this 1 hour, and really it's fantastic.
Well, I almost didn't make it, Jana. Thank you very much for being so patient. I almost failed on the technology, I'm afraid.
I know it will work because everything is possible. So I know that it will work, and it doesn't matter that it was 1 hour later. We were together, and it's really very important. Because I don't want to take your time. I really, if I want to ask you, what's your plan?
What's my plan?
After everything comes now to the reality, like to the normal, hopefully very soon.
Oh, apart from now, I have to make some food for my husband who's out gardening. This poor man is going to come in fairly soon and say, "Where's my supper?" No, not really. So seriously, I will do that, of course. And I've been doing this. We have been in isolation now for this is the 8th week, and just the two of us. If you'd asked us at the beginning that we would have to do 8 weeks without talking really for one-to-one with anybody else, would have said, we're not going to do it, But it's funny because we really have been very happy and finding resources that we didn't know existed, I guess. And really doing a lot of gardening. So we're going to have lots of food from the garden during the summer. And this is a wonderful resource that, use. It's such a natural thing to do, isn't it? To go to the garden, dig a hole and plant stuff and then come out and have the harvest later on. I think it's the most wonderful thing. And my father was a farmer originally, so I'm going back to my roots as well when I'm doing this.
Oh, lovely. Oh, how fantastic. I guess really this time brings us to a different point of view of everything, of the life, on the priorities of life. And this is exactly what you said, that you can enjoy now time to be with your husband, to really spend more time than usually you can.
Well, we will. I don't want to be like this forever. I mean, my plan is to get out and work and go to see my family as soon as possible. But I mean, there are things that govern us out there, and have to be respectful of what the rules are. We haven't been at all breaking those rules, and I don't intend to do so either. And I hope everybody else will adhere to the same thing and be as thoughtful of other people as they can, and I happen to be with my husband in the bracket of the older end of the population. And so, we want to be here for a little while again.
Yeah.
I think keeping the rules is important.
Absolutely. Keep safe, really. Stay safe and really take care of yourself. And it was absolutely marvelous to talk to you.
Thank you, Jana, so much indeed, and for your patience more than anything. Next time I'll be able to do this technology, but it was wonderful to do it. Thank you.
We are set up already. We know how it works now, so I'm sure we will see again very soon. And I thank you again very much, Elinor. It was really beautiful. I wish you once more all my best, and I'm so much looking forward that we will see each other next year in Cardiff. And
indeed, I look forward to that enormously. And I don't have to do any planning or any hard work. I mean, Carol and Catherine and all those people are working very, very hard down there, and we're going there to enjoy ourselves.
Absolutely. But we are so happy to have you, and really thank you so much for everything what you are doing. And I'm looking forward to see the triple harp, and certainly many people would like to learn. And I
will hold you to that, Jana, and I'll give you my first lesson, all right?
Oh, my big honor. Thank you. I will be totally lost. One row is...
No, you will not. I guarantee you will be off like that.
Thank you so much. It's a really big privilege for me.
Thank you, Jana.
Take care, Elinor. All my best wishes again. And I'm looking forward not only to see you soon, but to see you tomorrow, all of you, because we will have another wonderful guest, Natalia Shameyeva from Russia, from Moscow. And she's going to talk about, of course, Vera Dulova and all the Russian harpists. So I'm very happy and looking forward to see you again. And thank you very much, Elinor, again.
Thank you.
Have a nice evening and good supper.
Bye-bye. Cheerio.